There is an incredible and dangerous world, and it's not in deep space. This is Earth. This planet is huge, powerful, and in many ways even scary. And yet, it's the most beautiful thing we've ever seen in our lives. Our mother, and a mother to every living thing we know. But at the same time, it's full of mysteries and secrets. In this video, we'll take a great trip to see the most mysterious places of our planet. We'll find out their secrets and why they are so remarkable. Let's dive under the ice of Antarctica and Greenland to see if there's life here that was isolated for millions of years and took its own evolutionary course. Let's see what the sands of the Sahara and the Egyptian pyramids hide. What's under them? You'll see and hear what Soviet scientists found when they dug the deepest well in the world. And finally, we'll go down to the bottom of the Mariana Trench and under the Bermuda Triangle. Mysteries of the planet Earth. "53 million years ago, it was so warm here that the shores were filled with palm trees, and the air temperature rose above 20 degrees Celsius. And just recently, the temperature dropped to minus 89.2 degrees Celsius in this place. It is the 5th largest continent in the world. 99% of the mainland is covered with ice, which is on average 3 kilometers thick. It stores about 80% of all freshwater reserves on the planet. And you are not allowed to be here if you haven't removed your wisdom teeth or appendix. This is Antarctica. The surface of its mainland is well studied, but as always, the most interesting stuff is hidden deep inside. Well, it's time to find out what lies under those thick layers of ice. Is there life there? And does it resemble ours? What was found under Antarctica? Please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. It was Russian scientist Peter Kropotkin who proposed the existence of fresh water under the glaciers of Antarctica at the end of the 19th century. He argued that the tremendous pressure exerted by the combined mass of thousands of square meters of ice could reduce the melting threshold in the lowest parts of the glacier to the point where the ice turns into liquid water. And soon, such places were really found. As of 2021, about 400 such lakes have been identified. One of these lakes is of great interest to scientists. The reservoir is about 500,000 years old. It's a real treasure trove of knowledge about the world and possibly prehistoric life forms. Meet the Lake Vostok. The existence of a lake under the Russian Vostok station was proposed in 1966 based on satellite images, which showed that a reservoir could be located under 4 kilometers of ice. Only in 1996 this information was confirmed, and the boundaries of the lake were established, combining various data. Lake Vostok is 250 kilometers long, 50 kilometers wide, and spans across 12,500 square kilometers, which is approximately equal to the area of Sydney. According to various estimates, its depth ranges from 600 to 1,200 meters. This is slightly less than in the deepest Lake Baikal. In terms of volume, Lake Vostok occupies the 5th place on our planet. That is, a gigantic reservoir, which is one of the 5 largest lakes on the planet, is buried under 4,000-meter thick ice. Can you imagine that? And this is hidden from our eyes. In terms of altitude, it is located 500 meters below sea level, which makes it one of the lowest lakes on planet Earth. It seems that the water in the lake was conserved and remained untouched for 15 to 25 million years. In fact, it's so ancient that it emerged ages before the Homo sapiens. The average water temperature of the lake is -3 degrees Celsius. One might wonder, why doesn't the lake freeze? This happens because the adjacent layer of ice exerts high pressure on top, and the lake's bed is heated by geothermal heat from the Earth's core. The environment of Lake Vostok is saturated with nitrogen and oxygen. It is believed that the huge mass of continental ice, which creates a pressure of about 350 atmospheres, contributes to a high concentration of nitrogen and oxygen, which is 50 times higher than in ordinary freshwater lakes. Keep in mind that car wheels have a pressure of only 2 atmospheres. The lake's tremendous pressure poses an extreme challenge for survival. But what hides inside the lake? To find it out, scientists started to drill a well in 1989. In 1998, researchers working at Vostok Station dug one of the longest ice cores in the world. A joint team from Russia, France, and America drilled and analyzed a 3,623-meter-long ice core. The age of ice samples from cores drilled near the surface of the lake is estimated at 420,000 years. However, drilling was deliberately stopped at about 100 meters above the estimated boundary between the ice sheet and the lake's waters. This was done to prevent pollution of the lake from freon and kerosene, which kept the well from freezing. In November 2010, scientists presented the final environmental assessment of the project to the Environmental Protection Committee for the Antarctic Treaty, and they were given the green light to go ahead and sample the ancient waters. In 2011, drilling was resumed. In February 2012, Valery Lukin, the head of the Russian expedition to Antarctica, said that his team had only 50 meters left to drill to the surface of Lake Vostok. Then the thermal drill sensor detected liquid water. At this point, scientists stopped the drill and pulled it out of the hole. Removing the drill lowered the pressure beneath, pulling water into the well. The researchers allowed the lake's waters to freeze in a core, and a few months later took samples of this newly formed ice and sent it to a laboratory. But what did they find there? Before 1998, a team led by Scott Rogers from Bowling Green University in Ohio had discovered 3,507 unique gene sequences from ice samples taken about 170 meters above the surface of Lake Vostok. But this find was highly questioned by the scientific community. Sergei Bulat, a microbiologist at the St. Petersburg Institute of Nuclear Physics, believes that this is nothing more than contamination, because his group examined the same set of samples and established that it was contaminated. Eski Willerslev, one of the world's most renowned ancient DNA specialists, is also critical of this find. He finds it suspicious that cultures that have been isolated for millions of years would be identical or almost identical to the known microbial sequences found outside the lake. This indicates that at least some of the sequences obtained are the result of contamination. Still, some of the discoveries have been confirmed. The first discovery was made in 2004, when an extremophile was found at a depth of 3,607 meters. These organisms use inorganic substances as the source of energy. Such bacteria are able to survive in extreme conditions. Keep in mind that they were found under 3,607 meters of ice. To put this in perspective, this is the equivalent to 3 Burj Khalifas stacked on top of each other, which coincidentally is the tallest building in the world. As studies have shown, these creatures live comfortably at temperatures of about -50 degrees Celsius. Presumably, they were originally found in warm reservoirs at the bottom of the lake. But that's not all. In 2014, Sergei Bulat announced the discovery of an absolutely unknown bacterium, which was named W123-10. It has already been found on the drill bit containing water from Lake Vostok. Sergei wrote a scientific paper on this and published it in the PubMed magazine. The most interesting thing is that the bacterium's only 86% genetically similar to all living things known to modern science. This is extremely low and proves that this bacterium has evolved separately from the outside world for millions of years. W123-10 might after all be the only basis for the hypothesis that we weren't always alone in the universe. Lake Vostok may have an environment that has been isolated by ice over millions of years. Theoretically, it might have similar conditions to those in the ice-covered oceans on Jupiter's moon Europa and Saturn's moon Enceladus. We can find something similar there too. Although Lake Vostok's size and mysteriousness are very intriguing, common sense dictates that we should start exploring more accessible bodies of water. So scientists focused on Lake Whillans instead. Lake Whillans is nothing like other lakes. The weight of the ice forces the water to rise under the glacier, causing the lake to sit on the side of a hill. This thin 2-meter deep layer of water, which covers almost 60 square kilometers, is held in a pocket of low pressure created by the ice sheet. On January 27, 2013, scientists broke through the ice cover and reached the lake. Water under high pressure entered the well and filled its lower part by 30 meters. A day later, the first samples were taken from the lake, and a camera was sent deep into the lake to take some pictures. It turned out that many different types of bacteria live here. The waters of the lake lie about 800 meters below the ice surface, so they are completely devoid of sunlight. The microorganisms that live there are chemoautotrophic bacteria that receive energy as a result of chemical reactions with inorganic compounds. They produce food using the energy from reduction of iron, sulfur, and nitrogen compounds in the lake, just like plants and algae on the surface of the Earth that produce food using solar energy. This was the first successful extraction of such high-quality specimens from an Antarctic subglacial lake. In 2019, researchers drilled another subglacial reservoir called Mercer Lake, which is 600 kilometers away from the South Pole. A core of a length of 1,067 meters was drilled to collect samples from Mercer Subglacial Lake. It's at this depth that the lake lies under the ice. Moreover, Subglacial Antarctic Lake Scientific Access scientists have collected dirt samples from the bottom of the reservoir. The expedition members placed the dirt under the microscope lens and discovered some elongated structures resembling parts of mushrooms or plants. In addition to these threads, the scientists saw the remains of tardigrades and crustacean exoskeletons. This was quite surprising because no one expected to see anyone more complex than single-celled organisms. If there was nothing strange in the bacteria that feed on the remains of diatoms, then the discovery of tardigrades and fragments of mushrooms took scientists by surprise. It's yet to be determined whether such organisms live in these environments or have been brought there from another place, for example, by moving ice. However, if these were local organisms, this would mean that the scale of life developing under the Antarctic ice is greater than we thought, and this lays the potential for further research. Not small interest is generated by the glaciers alone as well. After all, now they cover about 10% of the total area of the Earth. But what would happen if all this enormous mass of glaciers melt? Where would all the water go? What would happen to the oceans? Would saltwater mix with freshwater? Further, you will learn what would happen if all the glaciers were gathered together in one place. What parts of the land would remain if all the glaciers melted? What would happen to Antarctica? And finally, what would happen to the flora and fauna? And how might the big melting change the length of day? These are just a few interesting facts. What would happen if all the glaciers melted? The total volume of ice on our planet is roughly estimated at between 25 and 30 million cubic kilometers. Even a person with a good imagination finds it hard to picture how it looks like. Let's try and say that if we were to pack all glaciers in one place, a 1 kilometer thick ice sheet would be larger in size than all of North America. Now, let's think what would happen if all that ice melts. Of course, the melting would not happen overnight. However, the current data we are going to share with you is very impressive. In a bad way. Back in 2019, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change at the United Nations published a scientific report on the ocean and the cryosphere. The report resonated widely around the world. The study showed that even small glaciers could add up to almost as much of Greenland's ice. For example, from 2006 to 2015, Greenland lost about 280 billion tons of ice each year, while the remaining glaciers lost 220 billion tons. By comparison, Antarctica lost only 155 billion tons of ice during all that time. The total rate of rise of the ocean's surface during the nearest past years averaged 3.6 millimeters per year. It may seem insignificant, but in fact, changes in the climate accumulate gradually and may come in leaps and jumps. The prediction is that the rate of melting glaciers is likely to increase and accelerate. NASA also made a prediction about the inevitable rise of the sea level by 90 centimeters in the near future. Now, let's imagine that all glaciers melt overnight. Scientists at the University of California, Irvine made a prognosis for such a scenario in the distant future. They predicted that if all the Greenland glaciers melt, sea level will rise by 7.4 meters. If Antarctica melts, the water level will rise by 58 meters. If all the glaciers on the planet were to melt, the water level would rise by 65 meters. What parts of the land will remain? The climate change models show that all coastal areas of all the continents will go under the big water one way or another. It will dramatically change the shape of continents as huge areas of land get submerged. For example, Florida will disappear. The Netherlands, which has been desperately fighting against the encroachment of the sea for the past decades, will eventually lose this battle. So will Denmark. So will much of Northern Europe. St. Petersburg will be underwater, and Venice will finally sink too. The Caspian Sea will become a real sea. Now it is not even formally a sea, but a giant lake, as it is not connected to the ocean. After all the glaciers have melted, the Black Sea will cover the Caucasus to the east and make a new Bosporus to connect with the ocean. It will increase its size almost twice. China will experience huge floods as it loses part of its land to water. Water will cover the territory of Vietnam and the Philippines. Both countries will be badly affected. Dramatic changes will take place in South America. The Amazon River in Brazil will cease to exist because of a huge gulf formed on its place. It will greatly change the shape of the continent. The same will happen to the Parana and Uruguay rivers in the lower part of the continent. They will turn into a bay, and the city of Buenos Aires will disappear together with territories at least 100 kilometers deep into the continent. Africa, in comparison with other continents, will lose the least amount of land. However, it is not a reason to rejoice, as rising sea levels will additionally increase the temperature of the air and will make life impossible in most parts of Africa. In addition, Egypt, Alexandria and Cairo will be covered by waters of the expanding Mediterranean Sea. As a result of melting of ice and glaciers, the Big Water will form an inland sea in Australia, and the most part of a narrow coastal zone where many Australians live will disappear underwater. What will happen to Antarctica? What could we see in its place? Contrary to some predictions, the outlines of the continents will not be completely unrecognizable. A time traveler into the future will be able to look at the new maps of the Earth and recognize the contours of Australia, both Americas and Africa. But he or she will be amazed and puzzled by Antarctica, or rather at what he or she will see there instead of its place. The familiar contours of Antarctica are an illusion created by our current climate. In fact, even at the current level of the ocean, if we remove all the ice from Antarctica and leave only the land, we will see a group of large and small islands. And when all the ice caps melt, it will be covered by water or become a large archipelago. What will happen to seawater, flora, and fauna? Almost all glaciers have sedimentary origin. They contain billions and billions of tons of fresh water. All melted water will naturally dilute the salty waters of the ocean, thus reducing its salinity. In turn, desalination will lead to a dramatic ecological catastrophe. Some species of oceanic flora and fauna are bound to be extinguished. It will upset the fragile ecological balance. Some species of plants and animals will die out, while others will suddenly and dramatically increase their populations. It could launch a large-scale chain reaction and cause a global ecological catastrophe in the ocean and land ecosystems. As the salinity drops in the ocean water, it will go up in the groundwater. The significant rise in the ocean level will push saline water deep into the groundwater. It will create more salinated soils, making irrigation of fields and growing most food crops difficult on that land. Decreasing ocean salinity will cause the currents to slow down or even stop. For example, the Gulf Stream, which warms the air around northern Europe, would cease to exist. Of course, with global warming, the British Islands would not be threatened by cold temperatures, but there could be other drastic consequences. And of course, there are lesser side effects of melting glaciers. You should know that ice has accumulated not even thousands, but hundreds of thousands, even millions of years. No wonder that glaciers have accumulated tons of toxins from volcanic eruptions and other disasters. When they melt, all toxins will be released into the ocean and atmosphere, which does not bode well for either. Moreover, there are other hazardous substances frozen and stored in the permafrost. Scientists warn about potentially dangerous chemical compounds, dormant ancient viruses and bacteria to which we have no immunity, or even nuclear waste dumps, which by then could have been abandoned and destroyed in the chaos of global disaster. What will happen to the climate in general? Glacial melting will not occur in isolation from other processes on a planetary scale. The phenomenon consists of dramatic causes and tragic consequences. Global warming will affect ecosystems as well as human health, livelihoods, food security, water supply, and economic growth in many ways. As it accelerates and more water advances onto the land, more coastline becomes uninhabitable. A scientific team of anthropologists, ecologists, and climate change specialists compiled an extensive report after comprehensive investigating, modeling, and researching on the global climate change. The article, Future of the Human Climate Niche, published in the Journal of American National Academy of Sciences, PNAS, drew the attention of the world. It revealed rather grim and frightening data. Predictions showed that the areas of our planet with the average annual temperature over 29 degrees will expand from 0.8% to 19% of the Earth's land area by 2070. The impacts are projected to increase steeply with the degree of warming. By the way, we want to remind you that 29 degrees Celsius is an average temperature of the Sahara Desert. Temperatures will rise not only in the currently uninhabited desert zone, but also in the densely populated areas with the highest birth rates on the planet. Large areas in South America, India, Africa, Northern Australia, and Southeast Asia could become hot, hostile, and uninhabitable. It could happen even before all glaciers melt. Let us think about the length of the day. It can seem that the day length is unrelated to melting. However, global warming could affect the rotation of the Earth. Let us look at the giant Three Gorges Dam in China on the Yangtze River. It only slowed the rotation of the planet by 0.06 microseconds. Not much, but it is not a zero. When the glaciers melt, water will be pulled from the poles toward the equator due to the Earth's rotation around its axis. That is why the Earth may slow down the speed of rotation and the day will become longer by 10 to 20 seconds. Seconds added to the day do not worry mankind because humans will face more survival challenges. Currently, about 40% of mankind live close to water at up to 70 meters above sea level. As the water level rises, coastal cities and entire islands will be submerged. Cities and countries, like the Netherlands and Japan, may disappear. The governments invest billions into the programs to postpone the inevitable flooding. Sooner or later, those 40% of people will have to move inland, leaving the coastal cities behind. The livable areas will be overpacked. Humanity will experience the brunt of overpopulation. The flooding of the densely populated ports of Calcutta and Shanghai will cause not only human suffering, but also economic losses. Melting will destroy seaport infrastructure and disrupt the intercontinental trade, as all ports will have to be rebuilt. The fishing industry will have to be fundamentally overhauled. Water will also cover much of the fertile land. Therefore, agriculture and the entire food sector of the world economy will be affected. Any good news? Oddly enough, yes. Along with cataclysms, scientists point to possible positive environmental and economic outcomes of the Arctic ice caps and icebergs melting. Unfortunately, it is a small solace, as it will in no way compensate for the losses. We can only hope that it can provide opportunities for the adaptation of human life in fundamentally new conditions. The list of opportunities is not shot and will be presented gradually. Many experts believe that by 2100, most of the Arctic waters will be completely free of ice, which would open new routes for maritime cargo transportation. A new route between Northern Europe and the countries of Asia will open through the North Sea. It will be 40% shorter than the route through the Suez Canal. At present, the Northern Sea route is passable only for caravans led by icebreakers during short summer months. The recession of glaciers will bring new opportunities for mining. The Arctic shelf, for example, is one of the most promising sources of hydrocarbon reserves, and Alaska hides large deposits of gas, oil, copper, and nickel under ice. Territories which are now inaccessible in terms of subsoil development, Antarctica and Greenland, may offer the salvation for mankind after loss of many areas of mineral deposits. After discussing the unwelcome future that global warming can bring, we hope mankind will invent and implement innovative technologies for ecologically clean energy. We can stop and reverse global warming to save our planet. Mankind must live more responsibly and reduce its carbon footprint to prevent future catastrophes. Fortunately, there is time to make changes for the better. All we need is a will and determination to change for a better future so we can avoid a grim scenario. As we just learned from the video, it is better for mankind never to see what is covered by Antarctica ice.